Morning, ladies and gentlemen. Well, many of you would be wondering as to what a Home Secretary is doing in a gathering of electronic engineers and the subject being on defense policy. Well, it just so happened that that was my last assignment, so I've been associated with defense and defense policy for quite some time. I don't really intend to give you a status report because that is not my area of expertise. The reason why I'm here today is that very recently the Government of India had constituted an expert committee to suggest policy changes. I was the chair of that expert committee and presumably the only non-expert in that committee. The only reason why I was there was that I was involved in many policy-related issues of the Ministry of Defense. The important thing at that time was to look at certain aspects, both of a technical nature and of a policy nature. Now, since you are all involved in manufacturing, any product that you look at, basically if the intention is on make in India, then if I look at any product which is there before me, then I ask a number of questions. Then I say, well, look here, do I have the technology for that? Do I have the intellectual property for that? What is the material that I am going to use? Is this material available in the country? Is it a complex material or a simple material? Do I import it? Even when I get it, do I have the manufacturing capability to produce something like that? The dimensions, the criticality, the production processes do I have? Do I have the necessary quality controls? So there are a large number of questions that I ask, and ultimately, when I start putting it down, and then I say, well, look, I add up. Then I say, well, look here, when I add up the total cost, and I add up what I can really do and what I can really have, or what I have got from, or bought from someone else, then I suddenly find that, well, it's 10% which what I'm doing, and 90% is what somebody else has done, and I've just bought it out. So the basic question is, what really is make in India? The question is not that I am at a level where I have the technology, I have the processes, I have the skills, but I voluntarily choose not to use them because I can buy it from someone else, and I use my skills and my technology for where I have the most value added. So there are advanced technology countries which do that. I mean, that's how international trade works. It's not that you have to do everything, but you must have the capability and the choice not to do it. The question is, in how many cases India has that choice where voluntarily you have chosen not to do it. And that is what is the key issue in Make in India. Now that is a generic proposition and it cuts across the entire spectrum. So it is for us to decide whether it is electronics, whether it is chemical industry or manufacturing industry or whatever it is, against each parameter as to where we stand. And we find, by any statistics that we are using today, in terms of the IPRs, you find that, well, the graph is going down. In terms of complex materials, alloys, carbon composites, we use a lot of them in the defense sector. And we find that there's a long way to go. In terms of manufacturing capabilities still, so if you look at the defense sector itself, what has been the manner that we've been doing it is that basically prior to 2001-2, and I'm using that period only because the sector was opened up for private sector investment after that. But prior to that, you only had the public sector undertakings, the Ordnance Factory Board and the DPSUs. The private sector component was a very minuscule component which was introduced as a result of certain recommendations which were made by the American management agency Arthur D. Little post 1962. And that's how you had the Department of Defense production and supply. The supply portion came as a result of the recommendations of Arthur D. Little, and we've removed the word supply now, because that supply was a very limited context in which raw materials or some small items, forgings, some small items were passed on to small scale private sector companies by the OFB or defense PSUs. That's a very minuscule thing. So what really happened was that it was all internally generated. If you have an R&D establishment in the defense public sector undertaking or the OFB, they did it. But basically what they relied upon was the transfer of technology route. So if you look at large number of products, whether it is in aviation or whether it is in shipbuildings or submarines or even Bell, electronics, you find that a large number of so-called transfer of technology arrangements were entered into. But they were very limited in nature and in the depth. Capabilities were not built up. So when one particular unit lost its relevance, you went in for another transfer of technology and another transfer. If T-72 went, you went for T-90. If MiG-21 went, you make for MiG-23, 27, Su-30. You know, it just went on and on and on. I mean, there are so many examples which can be given. But it was a simple process because in most cases you had, it was merely a government-to-government sort of arrangement, generally only from one source. You had a bipolar world, and we, for various reasons, strategic and political, tied ourselves in most defense manufacture with the former Soviet Union. And even in those cases, the negotiations were quite simple in the sense that there were standard contracts. and they were handed over to you, and you made minuscule changes because that was really not your level of expertise, and you had really no choice. But the advantage was that you didn't spend much time on negotiations. Prices were all what we call political prices. They were not commercial rates. They were all rupee-ruble trade, so there was no problem of foreign exchange. They helped you in putting up large number of production facilities. So 70, 80, 90% of your defense equipment was Soviet-based. There were a few items which were from Western sources, and you had some sort of a negotiation technique. The short point I'm making is that there was a very simple environment in which people functioned. As far as the procurement agencies are concerned, you placed an order on an OFB or a DPSU. The buyer and the seller were the same persons, so it didn't really matter how much you were paying him. It came back to you in any case. As far as the imports are concerned, most of it were at political prices, so money was really not a major issue. But a sea change came both internationally, locally, and a bipolar world changed into a multipolar world. We did not jettison our old partners. They are reliable partners, so we maintained them. But as happened, and the non-aligned world shifted, a bipolar world came, diplomatic doors were opened with a large number of countries, and so you find that the defense sector started talking to the Americans and the British, and the French, and the Swedes, and the Italians, and the Israelis, and the South Africans, and the list is quite big.